Brought to you by runtogold.com, the premier source for monetary science applied to geopolitical, international, and economic, financial news and events.
Welcome back to the 41st episode of the runtogold.com podcast. This is an interview I had on WBT News Talk Radio with Pete Callender out of North Carolina. And during the first break, he made a joke. Well, I made a joke about, he said there was some static on the line and he'd never heard anything like it before. And I was like, well, I can't hear it. Maybe it's the black helicopters. Anyways, he asked me, we get into the interview and he asked me, well, what can we do to fix this? If you were an advisor to Obama, what would you do? And so I started getting into it, and lo and behold, after I say that there's no authority in the Constitution for Federal Reserve notes, boom, my phone completely dies. Absolutely completely dies. And I can't get it to turn back on for like 15 minutes. No idea what's going on. Of course, I had it all fully charged in preparation for the interview, so weird coincidences. Anyways, here's the interview. Enjoy.
Well, you remember a couple months ago, the president was talking about how this crisis could become catastrophe. Now, apparently, we're told that they misread all of that. They misread the signals, the signs. They misread the economic indicators. Apparently, we already were in catastrophe. I don't know what that means now because the stuff that they did apparently is not really working. Along these lines, my guest tonight, Mr. Trace Mayer, he is the author of a book called The Great Credit Contraction, but he also has some insight onto 6 financial mistakes that governments make. And welcome, Trace Mayer. You're on News Talk 1110 WBT. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you this evening?
I'm doing fine. Thanks for making some time for us. I appreciate it. So first off, give us an idea. Give us your background. Who are you, and what prompted you to write this book, The Great Credit Contraction?
Well, a little bit of my background. I hold a degree in accounting. I also hold a degree in law. So I come to financial commentary from a little bit of a different perspective. I was prompted to write the book because I've always been fascinated with the financial markets, and I talked to a lot of friends and family about it, and they'd always be asking me questions, and eventually they asked me to start a website, which I did, called runtogold.com, and it's really kind of taken off, and a lot of my readers asked for a book to clarify some of the basic fundamental economic laws and how they work and how they apply. And so that's what prompted me to write the book, is people asked for it, so I obliged, and I wrote it.
And the website is runtogold.com. We'll have that linked up to our website as well. And so you write this book, and in it you outline these, you call them economic laws, these fundamental economic laws. How many of them are there, and can you kind of give us bullet points on them?
Oh, well, there are a lot of economic laws that are at work. For example, people act in their own self-interest, for example. But when it comes to these 6 things that the governments are doing, these particular laws that are applying, for example, they're trying to prevent or delay the liquidation of bad investments. For example, a lot of people bought a lot of houses and commercial real estate property and other things, and they took out a lot of debt to do that. And now the market's trying to liquidate these bad investments, and the government is trying to prevent or delay those liquidations. They're coming out with different programs like the TARP or the TALF or these other bailouts. And so what they're doing when they do this is they're inflating the currency. They're printing a lot of money out of thin air. Well, that further exacerbates the problem. That further causes more malinvestment. And it's all done in an effort to keep wages up and also to keep the prices of this real estate and other bad assets up when really it needs to come down because people paid more than the stuff was worth anyways. And so these are a couple of the things that are at work, a couple of the laws that are being meted out, you could say. And it's a lot like gravity.
What of the argument that the dot-com bubble was replaced with the housing bubble, and that was kind of by design? I've heard criticism that Alan Greenspan, ostensibly an Ayn Rand aficionado, that he, in essence, created this housing bubble, and that by necessity it had to pop. And there was no similar efforts to prevent that pop for the tech bubble.
Well, are they smart enough? Are these government officials, are they smart enough to see the I guess you're alleging they would be intended consequences. Some people would say they're unintended consequences. For some reason, I don't know if they're that smart. But Greenspan very well could be, because he was, as you said, an Ayn Rand disciple. He does come from the Austrian School of Economics, and I'm also of the Austrian School of Economics. And you'll notice a lot of these people who call themselves economists, they didn't see this coming. Either Republicans or Democrats, left or right, I mean, all across the aisle, a lot of these people that call themselves economists, they didn't see this coming. And they say, oh, well, nobody saw this coming. Well, that's not actually correct. There are a lot of economists who saw this coming, and coincidentally, they're all pretty much from the Austrian School of Economics. And this really highlights a point. And the point is that what is taught as economics in most of the universities, most of the economists in the large banks, they're not actually, they haven't actually studied economics, but they've studied political dogma called economics. And because they've studied this political dogma, whether it's the Chicago School of Economics or whether it's Keynesianism or some of these other schools that are out there, these other branches of thought, it's still based on fundamentally faulty premises. And when you start off with a fundamentally faulty premise, the analysis that comes out of that will also be faulty. It's similar to if you start off with the premise that the sun revolves around the earth, whatever model you construct will be faulty.
Right.
And so like we had a lot of court physicists that used to argue that the sun revolves around the earth, today we have a lot of court economists who, by analogy, argue that the sun revolves around the earth. And now that their models are failing, they're like, oh, well, nobody could have seen this coming. Well, there are some Galileos out there, or Copernicuses, that did see this coming,
right,
and understand why it happened.
It's basically crap in, crap out, in your data models. And
that's what's happening. Except it's happening on a grand scale with trillions and trillions of dollars, and people's retirements and pensions, and it's very unfortunate because all the damage has already been done, and we're just now beginning to see the effects of this damage that has already been done. And so we can't really go and undo the damage, but we can choose paths that would hopefully mitigate causing any more damage. But unfortunately, a lot of the policies coming out of Washington, and Bush started the bailout,
right,
and Obama's just making them bigger. So left or right, they still both seem to be infected with this financial insanity virus, where it's like, well, let's just keep causing more and more pain.
It's because they've got to do something, or else people think they're not doing anything.
Right, and actually doing nothing would probably be the best thing that they could do, because it would allow for the liquidations to happen quickly. It would allow people to get offloaded at these bad assets, and then they could begin reallocating capital in a much more efficient manner. And so, the best thing that Washington could do would be to sit on their hands,
Right.
But, of course, there are a lot of special interests, like the banks, that want to be bailed out. And so instead of Washington sitting on their hands, they passed legislation that takes a lot of capital and shifts it from innocent parties and gives it to the more culpable parties like the banks, and bails them out at the expense of somebody else. And so we're seeing a lot of special interest at work, and I guess that's just the political process and what we do here in America.
Yeah, Trace Mayer is my guest. He's got a website, run2gold.com. He's also the author of a book, The Great Credit Contraction. And you're an entrepreneur, investor, journalist, although we won't hold that against you. I was one myself. And monetary scientist. You got a law degree, and you say you come from your writings and workshops focus on the works of economists Murray Rothbard and Ludwig von Mises. Those are Austrian economists, I'm assuming, from the Austrian school. I'm sorry?
Yes, sir. They're from the Austrian School of Economics.
Gotcha. And
Ludwig von Mises was the first one. Wrote most of his books were published in the very early 20th century, so 1910 or so, and then Murray Rothbard picked up kind of where he left off. There are other Austrian economists like Friedrich Hayek, who won the Nobel Prize for his writings about central bank interference in the market with interest rates and how it regulates production. But so that's kind of my background there.
Gotcha. So let's see. You've got 6 financial mistakes governments make. Go ahead and recap. We've already gone through a couple of them. Tick off the ones you've already gone through in the first segment here.
Okay, so the first 4 that we talked about, first, the governments try to prevent or delay liquidation. And this is liquidation of bad investments, malinvestments. So people bought a bunch of homes, they overpaid, now there's a bunch of debt. They're trying to prevent or delay the falling of these house prices. They do this by, and this is the second point, they inflate the currency further. And the 2 reasons they do this, the third point would be they want to keep wages up when wages should be coming down. And also, number 4, they want to keep prices up, the prices of these bad assets.
Isn't this
paid for?
And isn't that exactly what the government did and the central bank did in the run-up to the Great Depression and during the Great Depression with artificially inflated wage controls, telling industries what they could pay their workers?
Yeah. I mean, it was called New Deal.
Yeah.
because it had a lot of the Supreme Court, the legal theory they tried to create was called economic substantive due process, which was basically we want to have freedom of contract. And Franklin Roosevelt, he wanted some nameless, faceless bureaucrat in Washington to say how, I'll use eggs as an example, how many eggs should be shipped to Salinas, California, and what the price of eggs should be there. And the Supreme Court kept striking him down until he threatened to put more justices on the Supreme Court until they vote the way that he wanted them to vote. And then that's when the Supreme Court started switching their votes and allowing the New Deal legislation through. And it's actually called a constitutional revolution. The leading constitutional historian, Yafrosky, that's what he calls it. And it really is because, I mean, there's a bright line of demarcation in constitutional law where this happened in our history. And it really did. It prolonged the Great Depression and made it a lot worse than it otherwise needed to be, trying to prevent these liquidations and keeping the prices up.
All right. So what are the last 2 of the 6 mistakes?
Yeah. So the 5th point is the government tries to stimulate consumption and discourage savings. And then the 6th point is the government they subsidize unemployment. And so we're seeing both of these points being played out right now because the government's trying to get people to go out and spend. Consumer spending makes up 70% of the economy, and nobody's spending. So they tried to send out the stimulus checks. They're trying to stimulate spending. They're trying to discourage people from savings. When really, what we need is savings. Savings is a good thing. Savings is what allows us to buy a bulldozer instead of a shovel, or a backhoe to dig a hole with. And so they're trying to do that, and then they're also, of course, subsidizing unemployment, which we're seeing on a grand scale because now I think something like 20% of Americans receive some form of formal welfare from the federal government. So, I mean, they're doing all six of these things right now.
Well, that doesn't make me feel very hopeful that this, I don't want to call it a malaise, but that the current economic situation is going to get rectified anytime soon.
No, it probably won't. I actually, this was in one of the articles on my site. I said how to intentionally exacerbate the Greater Depression. So if you want to turn this recession into just a Greater Depression and make it really bad, like do these things. And then Washington came out, and it looks like they're following the advice.
So we can blame you.
Maybe I shouldn't have told them what to do.
Yeah, so we can. So there you go. If anybody's looking for somebody to blame, his name is Trace Mayer. And
I just said, this is what would happen. This is the economic law. Like, if you want to break the glass, then drop it from your hand. And government, they're dropping the glass from the hand now.
All right, my guest is Trace Mayer. He has a website, runtogold.com, also the author of a book, The Great Credit Contraction. And we've gone through these 6 fundamental financial mistakes that governments make. And the government made them in the Great Depression, and government appears to be making them now. So what kind of solution is available, or is, I at the risk of giving people false hope, because I don't really think anything that we say here is actually going to be done, is going to reverse this course. But let's just say you're the advisor to the president. What would you advise the president and Congress to do?
Okay, so this would be advice to on a general level for the nation instead of individual personal advice?
Correct.
Okay. Well, this raises a little bit more of my own personal preferences. Like, I like freedom, peace, and prosperity. So in order to accomplish that, I would encourage our elected officials to return to a constitutional form of government. And this has everything to do with monetary policy. What we use as currency today, the Federal Reserve note, is specifically prohibited in the Constitution. There is no authority for this type of legal tender.
Trace Mayer, I appreciate your time. This will all be up on our website, links to the book as well, and the interview on the podcast, so feel free to use it as you need to, and we'd love to have you back on. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to the RunToGold.com podcast, the premier source for applied monetary science on the web.